I am trying to visit every single country on the planet, and today I'm in the Kingdom of Tonga, Nigeria. I have made it to the gates of hell. This is the easiest country to hitchhike. Guys, I've just landed in South Sudan. I'm now in Port Moresby, and some people came running after me. Security guard saying you need an escort. I'm in Somaliland and the Republic of the Congo. Guys, I've just entered Ghana. This is the Notre Dame of Africa. I'm currently in the birthplace of humanity. You know me from TikTok?
Yeah, you were in Samoa?
Yes, amazing. I can't believe I have followers from Tuvalu. Well, I'm on my mission to visit every single country in the world, and ideally I'll also become the youngest man to ever do this. But a lot of people don't know that originally I'm actually a juggler. That's how I got into the whole traveling thing. And yeah, right now I've been on the journey for 4.5 years full time basically, and now I'm trying to get the last countries done. I'm only missing 5.
Because you started your content journey sort of 10 years ago when you were doing your juggling and uploading videos like that. And then it seems like you kind of started posting more about your actual travels 2 years ago. Why the shift? Why did you go from doing all the performing and then you're like, actually I want to hit every country?
It was basically during COVID pandemic, like all of our shows stopped. So I was there and I was like, well, I could either just wait until things open up again, or I can try to focus on something else. And then I focused on social media, which I always quite enjoyed doing, but I never really did professionally in that sense. But juggling in itself won't get you really far. You have to combine it with something else if you really want to reach a big audience. Then naturally I chose traveling because I really love traveling. By then performed a lot internationally, and then I tried to just focus on creating travel videos instead. And it was much easier for them to go viral than it was for the juggling videos.
Is that because there's like a clear journey there? People can see where you are and you've got this ambitious goal that you're trying to head towards. What was your thought process behind framing the way that you produce your content? Because obviously at the start of every video you say, hey, I'm trying to travel to every country. You have the number that goes up on each of your social accounts.
Yeah, social media is knowledge in my opinion. You know how Mr. Beast says if he starts a channel today, in 3 months he'll hit 1 million subscribers. Just because he knows what he does. And I think one of the things for me is that you have a mission. You know, there's this one guy who his sole mission was to hug Elon Musk. And then eventually he managed after a 1-year journey. And that's kind of the same what I'm doing. I'm always, even if people hate me, even if they don't like me, they're sticking around to watch my travels. Like, oh, is he gonna do his mission? Is he like succeeding with it or not? People love missions, and it's much easier to go viral with them. You know, if you post like, I'm on my mission to do this, people are immediately engaged. So that's what I did, and that's much harder for juggling. Yeah, and it's partly because people don't understand juggling. Sure, I can be like, my mission is to hit this trick and I'm working towards it, but no one understands it and no one really gives a damn, you know? Whereas with traveling, it's very easy. What? You're trying to visit every country? What about North Korea, they ask, you know? It's like everyone has an understanding of how difficult it is, and that's why people stick around for it.
Well, speaking North Korea, that's one of your last 5 countries, but it's only opening up in December. You can get in?
Finally, it will open up in December, yes.
And was it Libya, the other country that you're stuck with?
So the other 4 are Libya, Sudan, Mali, and Palau. Palau I just left as my last country, so that's going to be fairly easy. I already got my Mali visa, so I'm going to do it next month probably. And then Libya is somewhat difficult, but not impossible. And Sudan is the one that I'm basically stuck with, because they're sadly in a terrible state of civil war, and it was very tough. Like, we tried to do some humanitarian project there, but they don't even issue humanitarian visas at the moment, so it's very, very difficult.
And because you're doing a generic world record, not a Guinness World Record, you don't have to abide by the same rules that Alexi did to be the youngest person to hit every country.
I'm not doing the official world record, to be honest, because otherwise I would have to carry a GPS tracker with me at all times and stuff that I definitely haven't done since the beginning, you know, and it's a lot of pieces of evidence. And since I already have my juggling world records, I'm like, well, can't be bothered too much. Like, sure, it would be fun to actually have the official world record, but right now it's literally impossible because I didn't travel with a GPS tracker, and I'm rather enjoying the countries that I travel to.
In anticipation of this discussion, it reminded me of Jessica Watson, who was the youngest person to solo circumnavigate the globe back in 2010. And she also did a similar thing to what you did in terms of documenting that journey, whether that be through a written blog or the occasional video logs as well. And it's interesting to see how things have changed in the past 14 years, but there's still that underlying thing of people wanting to follow along in that daily journey and see the progression, and going from a point where the Queensland government was trying to ban her from even leaving to then when she came back to Sydney having 80,000 people welcome her into the harbour. And you've got that similar process where you may not have 80,000 people in the harbour welcoming you, but you have millions online who are following that journey, anticipating, is he going to make it? Is he going to give up? Are these countries too hard? Is he going to get kidnapped in Port Moresby? Like, all these different stages. What sort of effects have you seen from that community, either in person or the influence you've had on other people who are aspiring to things that you've achieved?
Well, the crazy thing for me is that there are literally people following me all around the globe. I was in Tuvalu, literally the least visited country in the world, and people recognized me on the streets. They were like, I saw your TikToks. You were in Samoa some weeks ago. And I was like, yeah, that's true. Holy shit. The crazy thing is I try to keep my accounts quite politics free, and I think that helps with bringing in the world. I don't try to it's sometimes very difficult, but I try as much as possible. I try not to talk about things like politics and things that typically divide people. I try to make everyone feel welcome on my account, if that makes sense. So that results in having followers from literally all across the globe, and I think that's really cool. Like, no matter where I go, if I go to West Africa, I sometimes get recognized in the airports and on the streets, because a lot of people watch my videos there. Obviously, it's more the English speaking countries. So if you go to Kenya, I'm basically famous there. If you go to a place like, obviously most of my followers will be from the United States, from the UK, those kind of typical English-speaking countries, and then a lot in Europe as well. But what I really like about it is that you have followers from those places. I have people from Tokelau that follow me, and the island has like 1,500 inhabitants. I'm like, how is that even possible? It makes it feel surreal, to have people literally all across the globe that are following my journey. It's pretty insane.
Which just wasn't possible sort of before this sort of social media era, where you're able to reach out to so many people you would have never been able to meet before, which is incredible to see, that sort of impact that you could wield on so many others. Because you're going to 195 countries, which is the 193 UN members plus 2 observer states. What was the thought process behind that versus like whatever the 93 or the 206 independently governing, like Transnistria and Western Sahara and stuff like that?
Yeah, so for me, it's kind of like the only number that really makes sense, because once you add the other countries, and I'm not saying I'm not going to them, I've been to Transnistria, I've been to Kosovo, I've been to all those places that people then add up to the other ones. So I've been to way more if you count all the like unrecognized places, all the French overseas territories, for example. But to me, 195 is like the only number that makes sense, because 193 is okay, the cleanest. It's like all the UN members. But then I would have to exclude the Vatican, which literally every country in the world recognizes, So it's like, okay, if I want to include the Vatican, I have to include Palestine as well, because obviously those two make up the observer states. So the UN observers I add on, because to me it just makes sense. They're still kind of UN members, even though they're not full members. And then that's why I cut it, because every country that you add on top of it, even though I really want to go to those places, and I've been to a lot of them, it just doesn't make sense for me to count them in, because then it gets very political very quickly, and you're like, well, if you add in this, you have to add in this, and then people get annoyed, and then, for me, 195 just is a clean one.
What made you want to embark on such a journey? Because I assume it's not like you wake up one day and you're like, yeah, I'll just travel to 195 countries. Why not? Like, what was that shift? Was it after touring around doing your juggling? You go, oh, this is fun, I'll keep going? Or
yeah, actually, as a kid, I've never traveled internationally. So I took my first flight when I was 14 or 15 years old. To Poland. Okay, sure, we've been to the Netherlands a couple of times because we live like half an hour away from the border. But my family always went to the German North Sea, which is super beautiful, But I was always a bit jealous of my classmates. They were like, oh, yeah, I'm going to New York, I'm going to Spain on holiday. And my dream was always to go to Spain. And then I started traveling a bit for juggling shows and juggling conventions. And that's how I started traveling in Europe. And then I did it a bit with one of my best friends. And we traveled around a bit, and it was really fun. So at some point, I was always following those people that were trying to visit every country, that were going to crazy places. I just, to be honest, never thought it would be possible at all to even travel to every single country in the world. And then when Corona hit, basically, I had traveled for shows and stuff. I had traveled to around 50, 60 countries. And I was like, well, instead of stopping it all now and really just focusing on my juggling, maybe actually I'm going to set the goal to travel to every country in the world in my lifetime. At some point I want to do it. I was at 50, 60 countries, something like this. I was like, well, it's only like 4 times as many left. You know, like I'm already 25% there.
Got a good
so I might as exactly. So I might as well set the goal and see if I can do it in my lifetime at some point. And then it just so happened to blow up online, and I was able to make a living from it, basically, because that wasn't sure in the beginning. That wasn't like I was making a living doing juggling shows. You know, a lot of people online, they assume that I live off my parents and that my parents pay for it and that I have rich parents and this kind of stuff. No, I've paid for everything from the very beginning on. I've paid for everything myself. So obviously I had to do the transition from performing juggling shows for a living to then making a living online on social media. And I'm still somewhat in that transition. You know, I still perform juggling shows occasionally, but nowadays I almost fully live from social media.
So is it just the AdSense and ad revenue that you get from it? Because it seems like you don't do that many brand deals. Like you did the SIM card a little while back, but you're not flooding your feed with stuff that you probably could if you wanted to.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Actually, it's mainly brand deals. Yeah, I've worked a lot with Safety Wing, for example. It was more on TikTok, like the travel insurance Safety Wing, and those kind of travel brands. But actually, I would love to do way more brand deals. You know, I'm not like one of those influencers that spams a lot. And that helps me, and that's what my followers like as well. But also from a monetary standpoint, I would actually love to have way more collabs, to be honest.
Yep, it's not a cheap hobby to be traveling the world. But you've found ways to do it. Like you have a great Skyscanner series from a few years ago on your channel and different sort of things of, if you've got some flexibility, you can actually travel pretty cheaply. But have you had issues with, because once you start going to some countries, it becomes nearly impossible to get into other countries because they hate each other, and our mutual friend Yanis had problems at the Russian border and things like that. Have you run into any issues having those conflicting stamps and things?
Very rarely, but it really helps to have 2 passports. So I have 2 German passports. So you basically just need to apply for it at your like local office, and you're like, hey, this is why I need 2 passports. And it's usually enough to be like, look, I have some shows here and then in the US, and then I'm going to Afghanistan as well. You know, and then that's enough of a reason for them to be like, okay, we'll give you 2 passports for kind of the 2 different political branches, you know. So I have 1 passport full of countries like the US and all the Western countries, you know, and then I have 1 passport full of like Somalia and Yemen and all those kind of places.
Yeah, because once you get a couple, there's just certain ones that the US is like, nope, you're not allowed in anymore. Like sort of Iran and places like that. So yeah, you've got to hide it in the second.
Fun fact, I wasn't even allowed to travel to the US for quite some years because I then went to Iran and other places. Like they have a blacklist, so if you travel to those places, you're not allowed in visa-free at least. You have to get a proper visa. Yeah. And then just after the pandemic, it took like months and months to even just get an appointment at the embassy. So you'd have to schedule an appointment online. And if you cannot make it, then you have to go through the same process all over again. And then so all of my friends did it, and they had like waiting times of around 6 months. So they really like had to schedule it in, like this is when I need to be at the US embassy to be able to go to the US again. Yep. So I did it like, actually the beginning of this year, I got my visa finally to travel to the US again in early January.
Amazing.
And it actually went through very fast. So I did it in Frankfurt. I can recommend like to any, because you can do the appointment like anywhere, at least in your country of residence. And for example, in Germany, we have 4 or 5 different US kind of outlets where you can do it. And so I did it in Frankfurt, which was definitely the least busy compared to like Munich or Berlin. So definitely recommend like looking beyond the capital city of your country if you want to get a US visa, because sometimes you have waiting times of like 5 months, and then I don't know, if you go to a different city, it's just like a couple of weeks.
But what is your process that you go through? Because you used to do a lot more long form content, now you do a lot more short content. How do you think between doing shorts versus stories, and your process that you go from ideation to actually putting your content out there?
Well, I really don't do YouTube anymore, to be honest. I want to start with it again now that I have actually like some followers that I can direct towards YouTube. But TikTok is just by far the easiest to blow up with. So I'm filming those very engaging TikTok videos that will blow up. It's like, oh, look, I'm in the Congo right now. I'm trying to visit every country in the world, and today I'm here. And that sort of stuff is really engaging. And that's how I got my followers in the first place, because those kind of videos blow up, and then it kind of sweeps over a bit to Instagram now. It's getting big as well slowly. You know, I just hit 225,000 today on Instagram.
Nice.
So I definitely I'm seeing a lot of growth at the moment, as well on Instagram. So I'm trying to direct people back to YouTube, because that's where obviously you can make a lot of money as well with monetization. And TikTok, for example, I don't make a single penny with TikTok through monetizing, even though you have the creator fund and everything. I'd be making like
under a
4,
minute.
5, 6,000. No, that's not the problem. Hold on. So I would be making like $4, $5, $6,000 every month, but TikTok doesn't recognize my location as being in Germany, because I'm never there, and I cannot change it. So because of that, they're like, well, it's not available in your region. So I cannot join the creator fund, and I'm literally sleeping on like $5,000 every month.
That's crazy. It's absurd. YouTube is like the only platform that seems to actually pay out. Sometimes I've heard Facebook can do well as well. But yeah, no, TikTok, they're just like, how can we not pay people?
I just did the Instagram monetization as well. And then in the beginning, it was such a hassle. It's just not very creator friendly, in my opinion. And now they do have the bonuses and stuff. But even that, sometimes it takes months to pay out. And then you need to verify something, and they're like, well, it takes 2 to 4 business days, and after 2 months it's still not done, so I just got a payment of $400 or something back from February, which is crazy.
Oh my god.
Yeah,
it's like following up with any sort of job. Like, people just don't want to pay, and like, yeah, we have a net 90, and it's like, no, just pay me now. Like, have you ever gotten in trouble for a piece of content you posted, or you balancing the whole thing about over tourism in some areas, or telling people about an area that locals want to keep under wraps? Or how do you balance all of those things when you have such an influence and such an ability to wield a crowd?
Yeah, you definitely tend to get a lot of hate if you talk nicely about places that you should not really talk nice about. For example, Syria. We went to Syria. It was my country number 112 or something, definitely high up in the list. And then a member of the European Parliament tweeted about us, saying you're doing Assad regime propaganda for the Assad regime, because you talk nice about the country and you're saying, look, it's safe for us. So they twisted the words from, okay, it's safe to visit as a foreigner, to it's safe for the locals, like the far-right parties in Germany. They picked it up and they were like, look, those two stupid guys, they went to Syria. Now it's safe again. We can send all the Syrian people back to Syria, which is not what we said. We said, yeah, okay, it's somewhat safe for us to visit. It's pretty safe as a visitor if you're taken care of in a tour and stuff. But then just the fact that you talk nicely about a country, which is a dictatorship, people are not having it. And I kind of get it, but then as well, people make up a lot of bullshit. It's not nice if people are tweeting about you like, oh yeah, you're being paid by the Assad regime, for example, which is like, no, that's just not true. And then obviously, yeah, you get a lot of shitstorm for it, which is completely unnecessary, because they completely ignored, for example, that it was country number 112. They presented as this German dude is going on holidays in Syria, without ever mentioning that I'm trying to visit every country. It doesn't make sense,
Not as good as a headline to add the whole story there.
Exactly.
It's kind of like, you can see that, the US political system is crumbling, but I was just in New York and it was amazing. I loved it there. I'd love to spend time living there. So it doesn't mean that they're completely equate an experience, as you say, especially for a tourist just popping in. It's very different.
That's the thing. And if you say, well, that's what I love about my mission, I cannot be like, I don't like this country's politics. I still have to go to. My mission is not I'm trying to visit almost every country. I have to go to all of them. So I cannot have really any prejudices. And of course there's countries that I very disagree with politics, like Syria, for example, like Syria. But I need to give every country a chance. And if people start to be like, oh, I'm not traveling to this country because I don't like their politics, then which country can you even travel to? Every country has their own problems, and then it's just a matter of where you draw the line, in my opinion. And in my opinion, you need to differentiate between people and the politics and the government, anyway, just because maybe the politics of some countries suck, do give the people a chance that live there. Often they can do very little about it, especially if they live in a dictatorship and stuff.
Well, what I loved, were very apt, is last night I was watching The Swimmers, which is like a Netflix film about 2 Syrian refugees who escaped and ended up, one of them going to the Olympics and whatnot. But just showing the country in the way in which the locals see it, in terms of it is still beautiful, the landscapes are amazing, the people are amazing, and that you can kind of still have these normal lives like people in Ukraine will have, or whatever, even if there's a whole war raging around you. And I think that was a very interesting way to portray the world, and not always, looking down upon these situations, but trying to see some of the beauty within it as well. Like that's a nice little shift to, I think, what we're used to, and I guess what you try and do is you go around to these different cultures and things.
Yeah, exactly. And I also think it creates connections. You know, I always say once you have a personal connection to the other side, it's going to be very difficult to hate that other side. You know, like it's a great way to make the world a little bit more peaceful, like one connection at a time, basically. You know, because if you go to a country and all you do is talk about how shit it is, they're not gonna like you, naturally, of course, you know. The fun fact is, like, all the Syrian people, for example, even the ones that were in Germany, a lot of Syrians messaged me like, hey, thank you for showing my country from a nice side. You know, sure, there were a lot of Syrians that were like, well, you should have talked more, which is fair enough, you should have talked more about the troubles that we as Syrians have, yeah. But then as well, I can't really do that in the country. You know, I can't put myself into crazy danger.
You need to get out first.
So you need to kind of balance it, of course. But I think by talking nicely about certain countries and showing the hidden gems, like if I go to Afghanistan now, yeah, I would have to talk about the terrible things that happen there. But also Afghanistan is a really beautiful country, you know, and that is worth being seen, in my opinion. And I think those kind of connections that you make on the way, they make the world a bit more peaceful, like one step at a time.
So I remember back in university, one of my tutors, he kind of asked the question, if you can just Google a photo of the Eiffel Tower, like what's the point of going? What is the reason we travel? Is it just to prove to others that we've been somewhere, or is there something lying underneath?
Yeah, for me, there's a lot of things that I learn like while traveling, or I'm trying to learn at least. You know, I've always been super fascinated by linguistics and languages, and then geography and geopolitics, those kind of things. Often the things that I don't really talk about in my videos, surprisingly. You know, I sometimes do those little stories where it's like linguistics with Luca, about things that normal people would probably find interesting. But like politics, for example, I almost never talk about, for the reasons that I said earlier. You know, I want to kind of welcome everyone, and it's very, very difficult to talk about politics in a neutral way. You know, it's impossible, I would say. You always have some sort of standpoint. And I try not to do that as much as I enjoy talking about it. You know, you learn so much, you understand how the world works by actually going to those places. Because once you talk to the locals, you're like, whoa, this is how it works, and this is how they see it. And this is, you know, I'm currently in Argentina, and Argentina recently got a new president, Javier Milei, who's very controversial, you know, and as an outsider, he's often presented as this guy who can like maybe save Argentina and like get them back to like stabilize the country, stabilize the economy, you know. And then you go here and the locals have a completely different approach to it, and they see him very differently. And I'm not saying we are wrong or they are wrong, you know, but they just have a completely different perspective. And when you add these perspectives together, you get a much better understanding of the world. And you do this in every country, you know. And also for me personally, I really love linguistics. So discovering kind of the languages of the world is also very, very fascinating.
Because, yeah, you speak 7, was it?
Bits and bobs, yeah. I would say I can get around in 7, but that doesn't mean it's on a very high level, you know.
That's the European sort of standard.
Yeah, like Dutch, for example. I wouldn't say I speak Dutch, but I can understand like most of it just because I live close to the border. You know, I have a lot of Dutch friends, and sometimes when I see them, just for fun, I speak in Dutch with them. But I would never say that I actually speak it. It's just it comes kind of natural if you surround yourself with it.
Well, that's how my family picked up German. Is they're based out of Arnhem, so you know you're right next door. So you're just kind of forced to pick it up, children's TV, everything. Yeah,
exactly. It's much easier in Europe, in my opinion, as well.
Because originally you were doing a lot more in German, and I assume you flipped to English because of that wide accessibility, like flipping from juggling to travel. It has much more of that wide appeal than, obviously, if you're just stuck to the German market, and Germans can speak English anyway, so you're kind of hitting everyone with that.
You just have a far bigger reach. You know, there's a lot of influences that stick to German because it's a bit more concentrated, and it's kind of nice as well. It's a country where if you're famous, it can be really worth it because people have a lot of purchasing power, and it's still quite a big country, you know. So it's not bad being famous in Germany. But I guess especially if you do this kind of travel stuff, it's more interesting if also the local people can watch it, and if you build up this community from around the world.
Travel influences isn't something that's unique. So why do you think that you have stood out in particular? What do you think you do differently to the typical sort of like, oh, cool, I'm in wherever fancy place now in front of a yacht. So like, what do you think stands out for you?
I think a lot of it is just handling social media very well. You know, it's like creating videos that are engaging is a huge part of it. You can like, I'm not saying my journeys are any different to other people, even people that just travel and don't film any videos. But what I do is I really try to focus on my videos and try to make them engaging, because it's my job in the end. You know, I have to film videos, even in places that are difficult, and I think that's another step as well, that I'm quite daring with filming videos. You know, I walk over a market where people tell me it's super dangerous, and I take my phone out and I start filming, and naturally a lot of people don't like it because they're like, well, okay, don't film here, but I have to in a way, because it's my job, and I also don't want to like hide it from people. You know, I do want to show every country somewhat equally, so I just go out and film, and that in itself just makes it really engaging, that I'm this daring person who goes out into danger and is filming. You know, I was in Papua New Guinea when there were like those shots next to me, and I took out the camera and I started filming. You know, it's just a reflex for me to try and film. I think that's probably it makes the difference.
Dumb.
It is dumb. Yeah.
I'll go to Port Moresby while there are active riots. This sounds like a great idea.
Well, I got the e-visa, so didn't.
Yeah, I survived.
I don't want to chicken out once I got the e-visa. I'm like, well, next country, here we go.
I guess you're in the region. Because it's like going to that different levels. Like, what was it, South Sudan, where you're doing the cow piss or something? Like, not the usual sort of things that travel influencers do. And I met two
Would you do
YouTube
it?
travelers. Would I do it?
Would you shower in cow piss?
Depends on how many views you're getting. It's like worth the conversion.
A lot.
You get like 13 views. I'm like, no. I didn't do
Not
this just so my
worth it.
family could see me be drenched.
My mom hated it. Can you imagine? My mom got so many messages from all of my family, like, what did you do? Like, what went wrong in his childhood for him to sit under a cow somewhere in Africa, being pissed on, and actually enjoying it?
Yeah, it is a bit concerning. But these guys I met when I was in a hostel in February, in less than a year, they'd already grown their profile to averaging hundreds of thousands of views of video on YouTube. And they had done a very similar thing to you about going to the places people don't usually go to, doing the things that people don't usually do. You know, riding like the third-class train in the middle of nowhere in India, or going into areas in Pakistan that tourists haven't been in years. And there's an element of that which I think really stands out, because it is hard to replicate. Doesn't matter how much people want to copy you. You also got to actually go to that same place. So I think that stands out, because you don't get that on a normal like Euro gap year.
Yeah, that's true. I actually, whenever I'm like in Paris or London, I don't typically take videos there, because there's thousands of creators that do it much better than me. That their videos are way more engaging. Their videos are way better. You know, way nicer edited and everything. I'm not the best with taking videos, but I just go to the places where I do try to make them as engaging as possible, but just going to the places where no one really goes to is enough to kind of make them viral, as long as the quality isn't like complete shit.
You're bringing that insight into areas like less previously seen. And you always have that quote at the start, which is like, hey, I'm trying to travel to every single country on the planet. How much do you think that helps people instantly understand, okay, this is... So I guess it carries with two elements. One, you know, the longer journey of like, why would I hang around for this account? And it also provides insight into the shorter journey of like, okay, I'm probably somewhere unique because he's trying to go everywhere. What's your thought process behind that?
Yeah, it's also, nowadays, a lot of the social media platforms, they're content-based, right? They're no longer follower-based, like traditionally on Instagram. If you upload an Instagram story, you can pretty much predict how many people are going to see it and who's going to see it. You know, your followers. But with TikTok, a lot of people, even people that I follow, I don't follow them actually, like hitting follow, but I see them time and time again on my For You page. So having this sentence in the beginning is like, it's like a trademark, you know? You're like, oh, it's this guy again. People don't typically know my name, but they know that I'm the German guy who tries to visit every country in the world. You know, so having this sentence, it's like they're scrolling and scrolling all day long, they're scrolling. So even though for me it's like repetitive and I'm like, well, I shouldn't say this all the time and all the time over again, but for them it's like, well, every, I don't know, 20th video or something is my video, so it's like recognizable for them, you know, because it's not like Insta stories where if you start every video with I'm trying to visit every country, people will go nuts, they will hate you, you know, because it's shown always to the same people, and it makes a lot of It makes a lot of sense. But on TikTok, since it's content-based, every video is reevaluated, and then it's going to be shown to the same people again and again, and then they recognize you, and then they stick around for the mission. So it's much more engaging on such a platform.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's why, for a number of years, my stuff wasn't picking up, because I never had that. I didn't even know for myself what that journey was. Like, what was I heading towards? It was largely, effectively, just like building a set of skills that hopefully I can use from now. So it's always trying to find, even for yourself, and helps frame the content that you produce, and then the audience actually understands what journey to follow along of like why you're here, why you're doing what you're doing, and that's like it's so invaluable to have.
Yeah, one always needs to remember that random people that watch your videos, they have no clue who you are, you know. So you, as much as possible, try to give them like an idea of what you're trying to do and who you are. So if I say in the beginning of every video, I'm trying to visit every country in the world, they immediately know what I'm doing. It takes 1 second, it's super engaging on top of it, but they already understand, like, how you say, literally. I quite like that. I never really thought about it that way, but they're like, oh, he's probably gonna be in an interesting place because his mission is so unique. You know, that's like the underlying thought process, probably.
It's like a TV show or a David Dobrik intro. It's like when you hear that, it kind of flashes you back of like, okay, I know who I'm watching again. And while it kind of seems like, oh, it's just dead space, it's not actually. It does provide that sort of underlying hidden value that you previously wouldn't expect. So once you do finish all the countries, which I assume would be, maybe early next year, what are your plans then? Are you going to do something to celebrate? Or you've got that travel organization that you're working on?
Yeah, I just created a company with a friend of mine. It's called Every Country Tours, where we take people to those difficult countries. And obviously through traveling full time, I've built up a big network around the world. We work with local guides and like locals and places to stay, you know, those kind of things. We have a lot of connections also in those difficult countries. So if people want to travel to, I don't know, Nigeria or Ghana or Yemen or Iran, those kind of places where people usually tend to recommend, okay, get a tour. You know, that's what we organize with local guides, because often those places are very difficult to visit. You know, like, for example, Nigeria or some other African places, you're then asked, okay, send me 250 euros for the invitation letter to some random guy on Western Union where you have no idea whether you should do it. And then people get scared and they don't do it. You know, so it's much more reliable if I create a tour company and you can pay for the tour with your credit card, and then everything is taken care of. You know, and that's what we do at Every Country Tours. It's very new. We're going to launch around like next week or in 2 weeks. So that's quite exciting. Overall, I have so many like smaller projects that I don't really have time for. You know, even if it's doing like small like uni courses. I love doing the little mass open enrollment courses, you know, the MOOCs. So I've done like some about like linguistics or about like genomics and those kind of things that just kind of interest me just as a hobby. And then I start them and I'm somewhere in Africa and I don't continue them, and then I forget about them. So it's like so many things that I kind of want to start again and do again that I don't really find enough time. Or coding is another one. I really want to learn how to like program things properly. So I have so many little projects that finally I will have some more time again to do. I will still travel, but I will not travel as full-time as now, because I've been on the road like full-time for 4.5 years, and it's a lot, you know. I do need a base again. I can't wait for it.
Get some habits back into your life. You're not always like in a state of like, not fight or flight, but, you know, you're always in the move. There's no feeling of home, I guess.
Yeah, that's a huge problem of traveling full-time. And one of the most difficult things is that you can't see your family, or if you're in a relationship, or seeing your close friends even. You know, you're always on the go, and it's very hard to coordinate seeing other people. So a lot of it is very like self-focused, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but occasionally, it does get a bit lonely, and you're like, well, I'd much rather sometimes just have a base somewhere and actually have friends that I see, and have my family that I see, or my partner that I see, or something.
Definitely, yeah. My family did a lot of traveling back in the day. I mean, my mum backpacked for like 10 years straight around Europe and Middle East and the Americas, and, you know, sort of places where it's like this sort of, they'll just like casually drop around the kitchen table. It's like, I remember when the IRA held machine guns at us, or I remember the amount of times I've been held at machete points, and you're just like, oh no.
Yeah. Wow.
It's like, yeah, I'll never get to that level, but it's a completely different lifestyle to sort of like embark on the sort of long journeys where there isn't necessarily a clear end, or you don't know when it's going to end, or it's just continuous. But everyone who does it always seems to enjoy it. No one ever regrets it.
No, I do think it takes a lot of commitment, you know. I wouldn't really recommend anyone to visit every single country in the world, for example. It is a commitment. Like, do you really have to visit every single one of the Pacific Islands? probably not. You know, you'll probably be fine if you travel to 8 out of 13. But like, it's just a commitment. And that's partially what I really love about it. Because I have to give every country a chance. You know, it's not that I can be like, well, okay, I'm just not that interested. Like every country, I'm kind of forced to learn something about, and I'm forced to actually deal with that place and talk about it and learn about it and meet the people there. So that's what's special about it for me. But it is a commitment more than anything.
And if people want to keep following you along on the rest of the countries that you have to do or on your next projects, where's best to find you?
Anywhere at The German Travel Guy. Very simple.